Hey everybody, Craig Warrack here with another showcase of one of my custom Marvel Legends action figures, and today I bring you the multi-armed ninja sorceress and X-Men villain, Spiral. For those of you who are not familiar with the character, and you're totally forgiven for that, wait till you hear this origin story. Spiral hails from a parallel dimension known as the Mojoverse. This dimension is focused on producing cruel and unusual entertainment and is ruled over by Spiral's boss, Mojo. Mojoverse Mojo. You see? Clever, huh? Spiral originally appeared as a henchman of Mojo way back in 1985 in Longshot issue 1, where she hunted the titular X-Man and his sassy companion Ricochet Rita Wayward, and eventually captured the pair. Spiral and Mojo imprisoned Longshot and subjected Rita to mystical and cybernetic torture, exposing her mind to the powers of time and dimensional travel, driving her insane and altering her body. Oh wait, did I say cybernetic torture? I meant biocyberonic, but yeah, what? Yeah, thanks, no. Anyway, at the end of the torture, Rita was revealed to actually be Spiral. Yes, in a time paradox plot that could only really come out of an X-Men comic, Rita was captured and tortured by Spiral to become Spiral, so she could go back in time and capture Rita, to be tortured by Spiral, to become Spiral, to go back in time, to capture Rita. Oh, it's like a time loop, even worse. It's like a time spiral. So clever. Being a long-time Marvel fan, I do remember seeing Spiral in comics as a teenager, but she never really stood out to me. However, all that changed when I wandered into an arcade in the mid-90s and was floored by the sheer awesomeness of Capcom's X-Men Children of the Atom. So floored, in fact, that I bought a Sega Saturn instead of a PlayStation, as the Sega Saturn had the better port of the arcade game. Of all the characters Capcom could have chosen to join the roster, they went pretty obscure when they dug up Spiral, and thank the goddess they did, because this game made me into a huge fan of her. Spiral was always described in the comics as having to dance to activate her time and dimension warping powers, but the comic art didn't ever convey that well, in my opinion. But look at this little collection of pixels here. Isn't that beautiful? Her arms twisting and snaking around each other while she hunches over, gracefully hopping on that one foot. Add to that the swords that could be summoned to spin around her magically, and I was fascinated by the dynamic motion of this character. So here's my custom figure of Spiral. I wanted to get as much articulation as possible in this figure, so I did a lot of work Frankensteining different body parts together. Hasbro made a Spiral back in 2008, and she was a standout figure at the time, but given the amount of articulation a character like this cries out for, and the cost-cutting measures big toy companies have to contend with, she had her share of flaws. You can see in these work-in-progress pictures how I wanted to overcome these, adding in a lot of articulation into the arms and increasing the range of motion around the legs and abdomen. I also gave her interchangeable hands, 6 hands to hold her weapons and 6 hands for dancing, gesturing and magic casting poses. And yes, for all those with an eye for detail, I did give Spiral 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand. While she has been drawn with the same number of digits as a human by some artists, and Hasbro's figure of her was the same, that's generally accepted to be an oversight, and like other Mojoverse denizens, Spiral only has the 4 digits on each hand. This did require a lot of extra work though, slicing out portions of fodder hands and twisting them back together to make these alien hands. There are too many fodder donors to list, but the major ones are Marvel Legends Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch and the Wasp. I sculpted the hair from Sugru, a flexible mouldable rubber, and it allowed me to get some really nice dynamic shapes with the hair, and it doesn't become brittle and snap or impede the neck articulation in any way. Most of everything else you see is sculpted with Milliput epoxy putty and painted with Vallejo Model Air and Games Workshop Citadel paints. I also did some metal work with the jewellery twisted around her arms and wrists that's made of wire. Her belts come from various figures, and she has 2 scabbards for her swords taken from a fodder X-Force Deadpool, and sheaths for her knives on the back of her belt taken from a Game of Thrones Khal Drogo figure. As I mentioned earlier, I loved how Spiral could summon magical swords to encircle her, and I wanted to homage this with my figure. So I created this ring of swords, and I have to say a massive thank you to the guys over at the casting cave, Mickey, Lewis and Corey, for helping me get clear casts of swords to create this effect from. It was a pleasure working with them, and the quality of their cast was superb. If you ever need any casted parts, I would recommend popping on over to castingcave.ecreator.com, links in the description, and checking out their work. Thanks again, guys. I dremeled out part of those swords and added hot glue to create the flame effects before gluing them all together in this ring and painting them with Tamiya clear paints. I also wanted to make a base for Spiral that captured part of her identity, so after a lot of thought about the character, I thought that Spiral having multiple arms and dancing could have had its original inspiration in Hindu mythology, particularly in the goddess Kali, goddess of, among other things, time, change, power, creation and destruction, who can be seen in many works of art dancing on her consort's body, wielding weapons in her many hands. So I decided to try and spin this influence back into my Spiral figure and created this base. I have reworked the ring of light and fire that surrounds Kali to be a ring of soundstage rigging and lighting, hinting to Spiral's origin in the TV-obsessed Mojoverse, and the body of Kali's consort has been recast as a pile of old school CRT TVs, showing her boss Mojo and also her one-time companion Longshot. The lights on the rigging are made from floodlights from those craptastic primeval figures that haunted British shelves for years, and I added LED earrings into them so they actually light up now. The rigging itself is made from standard truss material that you can probably find in any model shop. And the TVs are doll's house furniture, repainted, and I just printed out some images of Mojo and Longshot, cut them to size and glued them on the screens. And I also added a peg to the top of the TVs, and that fits into Spiral's foot, and that lets my Spiral get into that tiptoe pose similar to her standing pose in the X-Men video game I talked about earlier. That pose that sold me on the character in the first place. I really wanted to capture that in my figure. So that's my figure of Spiral. I hope you guys like her, and if you do in any way, please can you give this video a thumbs up right now. Getting that sort of feedback helps me keep making these videos and keep making these figures to show you. Get in touch with me and let me know what you think of her in the comments below, and if you could share my video far and wide, it would be much appreciated. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.